I'd like to thank everybody for joining me today. Today, I want to talk about asset protection planning, and I think this is an important topic that we probably don't spend enough time on. And if you think about asset protection, it kind of means a little bit different, something for different for everybody. But if I look at asset protection and really boil down what it is, I think what asset protection is bringing peace of mind to our clients, whatever that is, and however much they need to protect their assets, whatever helps them sleep at night. Are they worried about losing their bank accounts, their business assets, their real estate? Whatever that is, we put a wrapper around that to protect it from unknown creditors. Now, we need to separate, creditors. There's known creditors and there's unknown creditors. Well, the known creditors, if a client goes and takes out a mortgage on for a piece of real estate, well, that's a known creditor and they've accepted that liability. Now, what we want to avoid is that creditor that's lurking out in the shadows, that's looking for an opportunity to come in and take things away. So if we start with that and just say, hey, how do we create this peace of mind? We need to take a step back with our client and look at what they own. And I like this statement. It's not just what you have, it's how you own it. How you own it really depends on, are you going to have asset protection? Now let's look at things that don't work. And I see a lot of gimmicks out there. These are things that people promote that are just scams. And if you look at it, the first one is fraudulent transfers. Well, if you're already in a lawsuit or you're already in a divorce, you can't go and move assets around trying to hide them. Those are fraudulent transfers, and they're not only wrong, but you're going to get slapped pretty hard when it's found out. And it goes right along with hiding assets. There again, we can do so many things the right way. Trying to hide assets away and hope they're not being found isn't planning. Hope is not planning. We want to do real planning, so hiding assets doesn't work. I see this a lot of times, and I think this is troubling where people will put other people onto the ownership of their assets, thinking joint ownership somehow protects them. No, if you put somebody else on your home, on your vehicles, your business, your cars, whatever, well, now you've just put their liability along with your liability. So joint ownership is typically not a good way to do it. Finally, I'll see this. Haven't seen this as much lately, but it's still out there. Is constitutional trust, where people will come up and say, I have a constitutional trust, therefore the laws of the United States do not apply to me. Well, not only is that wrong, but it's going to get you in trouble at so many other levels. So if you start looking at this, and think about this, the way to, you hold title protects and affects your property rights against the creditors. So we want to look at these things and do it the right way. First of all, let's look at the easy things. And the easy things are nice. These are legal defenses that you have, or protections you can create. Number one, you can have insurance. You go out and get that property and casualty insurance, malpractice insurance for professionals, whatever those are. These are insurances that if you get in trouble are going to, take over the claim. So if you have slip and fall and somebody slips on your sidewalk in front of your business, well, yes, that's a creditor that's going to sue potentially, but you have insurance to protect that. Exempt assets. Every state and federal law protects assets. And we have to look at each state. If you own a home in Florida or Texas, that home is protected. Most other states, your home is one of the hardest things to protect. But if you look at some of these state and federal laws, retirement plans, anything you have in a qualified plan is by law going to be protected. Now, once you take it out, the protection goes away, but while it's in the wrapper, it's protected. Life insurance in the majority of states, life insurance and annuities are protected. Now, be careful because some states have no protection or very limited protection on the policies and the cash values in those policies. But there again, we want to look at exempt assets. We can set up irrevocable trusts. These irrevocable trusts, not revocable, but irrevocable trusts are a way to provide protection. One, to get those assets away from you and let your family enjoy them. But if you're a beneficiary of an irrevocable trust, while those assets are held in trust, they're protected. So if that home is held inside the irrevocable trust and you're allowed to live there as a beneficiary, well, if you get divorced, sued, or whatever, that home is protected. So there's ways to do that. We can have property agreements that allocate where the risk is. And so those are good. Then you look at these other planning ideas: limited liability companies, corporations, family limited partnerships, offshore planning. These are tools that we have available that allow us to organize the assets in the estate to where it creates the liability protection. There again, we want to look at everything and do it right. So let's take a look at how we would do this. The big thing is separation of the assets. Let's identify business assets, personal assets, investment assets, because each one has a different way to protect it. And the personal assets, I'll tell you, are the hardest ones to protect. So if we can make it a business or an investment asset, we're much better off. The first thing is get the assets listed out. Now categorize them. What category do they fit in? Now what we want to do is add a wall of protection. That wall of protection is so we know where the liability is going to stop. And we're going to start separating these assets accordingly. So if I have business assets, I want to move my business assets to one side of the wall. Now, inside, we may have additional walls inside those business asset classes so that we're separating away maybe operations from inventory, operations from the underlying assets being used in the business. So we'll deal with that at the business asset level. On the other side of the wall, I want to move my personal assets. So those personal assets, when we move them to the right side of the wall, if you think about this, most of the risk is probably in our business assets. And it's because as a business, you're out there operating, you're in public, you've got big pieces of equipment being used or out on the road. All of that we want to encapsulate away from our personal assets. We also want to have the business assets held away from investment assets. So let's talk about this. When we start looking at the different types of assets, think about business assets, the equipment, the vehicles, maybe the building and equipment, and accounts receivable. There again, we may separate those different assets away from operations just to make sure that it's set up right. On the right side of this, if you look at your personal assets, your personal bank accounts, your life insurance, vehicles, personal property and residence, all of those have a personal nature to them. Those assets we want to make sure if we can protect them, we will. But those I am saying this, those are the harder assets to protect. But if you look at this, life insurance is in that. There's some protection for life insurance depending on the state you're in. Your bank accounts, let's separate the bank account from what you need from day to day and move the rest down into the investment assets. Now, when we've got the investment assets, those are easy to put wrappers around. We can put an LLC around your investment assets. So with that LLC wrapper, if we're operating that LLC correctly and we're using that to manage the assets, now we have protection, and protection away from the personal assets, protection away from the business assets. So if you start looking at this, asset protection it takes time, it takes effort. What I always ask clients to do, tell me what assets you're willing to lose. And the assets that you're not willing to lose, let's protect them. Let's do what we have to and make sure that we go through all the steps to get everything protected so our clients have that peace of mind that helps them sleep at night, knowing that if unforeseen things happen, their assets are protected. I appreciate everybody getting on. If you have questions, feel free to reach out, And if not, we'll talk again next week. Thank you.